Hello and welcome to the LLG podcast. You're listening to Deborah Evans, LLG's Chief Executive, and Dennis Hall, the LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, Deborah. A delight to be with you.
Well, do you know, Dennis, it's great to be back on the podcast, not least because there is literally so much going on within the local government world. It's not just reorganisation, there's restructures, there's reviews, there's reforms of the legal kind. So let's delve straight in and take a look at the recent changes within the ministry. Dennis.
Indeed. Let's look at that new team at the ministry. So here's the question. What do we know? Finishing touches were completed last week to the new ministerial lineup at the ministry. So let's ask the question, what are the key changes? The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government has undergone a significant reshuffle under its new Secretary of State, Steve Reid MP. But for our sector, there are two key appointments that stand out. Alison McGovern MP is now confirmed as Minister of State for Local Government and Homelessness. Her portfolio includes local government finance, reorganisation, homelessness, supported housing and domestic abuse. And I should say on this, Deborah, that in effect this is the post that was held by Jim McMahon, who's now left government altogether. Now, McGovern was first elected as a councillor for the London Borough of Southwark in 2006, later becoming the deputy leader of the Borough Council's 29-member group of Labour councillors. Miata Fahnbulleh MP has been appointed Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Devolution, Faith and Communities, and her responsibilities span English devolution, mayoral combined authorities, regional growth, investment zones, high streets, and faith-based engagement. Now, Fahnbulleh has been the head of cities in the policy unit at the Cabinet Office. She was the Director of Policy and Research at the IPPR and the Chief Executive of the New Economics Foundation.
Now, meanwhile, Matthew Pennycook MP retains his role as Minister of State. Now, that's the Minister for Housing and Planning. Baroness Taylor of Stevenage also remains as Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State in the Lords. Now, she is the Lords spokesperson for MHCLG and leads on local government engagement. Samantha Dixon MP has also been appointed as Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State, Minister for Building Safety, Fire and Democracy. Now, I do hope you're keeping up with this because there will be a test later.
Yes, there's quite a lot of wording here. Now, these appointments replace former Parliamentary Under-Secretary Alex Norris, who's moved on to the Home Office, along with former Minister of State Jim McMahon and former Parliamentary Under-Secretary Rushanara Ali, who have both left government. But here's a question. What do we know about Steve Reid, the new Secretary of State? Well, Reid, who is leaving his post as Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs to join MHCLG, spent 6 years as the leader of Lambeth Council from 2006 to 2012 and was previously Deputy Chairman of the Local Government Association.
He has held a number of local government related positions, including as Deputy Leader of Local Government Labour, as Board Member for Children's Services and Employment on London Councils, and Chairman of Central London Forward, which is a lobbying group representing 5 inner London boroughs. Now, under Reid's leadership, Lambeth Council became the country's first cooperative council, which involved handling more control to communities and service users over how services were delivered. So the key question really is, what do these changes mean for LGR, devolution and the government's dash for growth in the housing sector?
Well, Deborah, commentators all agree that all of these policies are unlikely to change in a significant way. Indeed, they're at a quite advanced stage of development and implementation. But as ever, we will cover any changes if they do arise. But some surprises may be expected. Here's something hot off the press. It's just been announced that ministers are drawing up plans to give mayors significant new powers over hospitals and schools as part of a new wave of devolution that could change how public services are run in England. And Steve Reid, the local government secretary, wants to give mayors control over many more local services and is weighing up handing over some NHS services and even parts of the criminal justice system. And this sort of reflects what you've just said there about his experience at Lambeth. But the big questions remain for our members. What will the structure of local government look like in the LGR areas? Which proposals for change will be accepted? And indeed, which ones are heading for the bin?
See, I knew it would be impossible to stay away from reorganisation, Dennis. But one of the big news items from last week from a different ministry, this time the Ministry of Justice, was the announcement by government that it will introduce the Public Office Accountability Bill, to be known as Hillsborough Law. Now, indeed, the bill was introduced to Parliament on the 16th of September.
Well, that's right, Deborah. And decades-long campaigning by bereaved families has resulted in this landmark legislation holding public officials and authorities to account for their actions, and finally closing the chapter on one of the most tragic events in public life. Learning lessons from devastating disasters and scandals, including Hillsborough, Orgreave, Windrush, the infected blood scandal and Grenfell, the Hillsborough Law will, the government hopes, once and for all, end the culture of cover-ups and hiding the truth, ensuring transparency, accountability and support for bereaved families.
Now, the Prime Minister had made a personal promise that he would bring in Hillsborough Law, and the Public Office Accountability Bill is set to introduce seismic changes, including a new professional and legal duty of candour. Now, this means public officials must act with honesty and integrity at all times, and there will be criminal sanctions for egregious breaches. Now, it also includes the largest expansion of legal aid for a decade for bereaved families, providing non-means tested help and support for inquests. And finally, includes a new offence for misleading the public. Now, the government hopes this will lead to meaningful cultural change and a public service that truly acts in the public interest. But for those who don't, there will be criminal sanctions for the most serious breaches, including for misleading the public in a way which is seriously improper.
Well, Steve Rotherham, Mayor of the Liverpool City region, said in response, "Today is a landmark moment, not just for our city, but for the whole country. It's a day of history-making and permanent legislative change. It's an opportunity as well to enact the bill as a lasting legacy to the 97 Hillsborough victims unlawfully killed in 1989.
Now, Margaret Aspinall, who's a campaigner whose son died at Hillsborough, said, "It's been a long journey to get here. I am so grateful to the Prime Minister for fulfilling his promise to me. This campaign wasn't just about us, it's about the ordinary people of this country. Hopefully this law will mean no one will ever have to suffer like we did. This promise now was well worth waiting for. For the good of the people, we have got Hillsborough Law." This is a significant piece of legislation for transparency, and Dennis and Helen will cover the bill in more detail in the next edition of the vlog in 2 weeks' time. Now, in completely other news, taxi licensing concerns are back again. Dennis.
Indeed they are, Deborah. The reform of taxi regulation is indeed in the news. The Institute of Licensing has submitted a comprehensive response to the UK Parliament Transport Committee's inquiry into licensing and standards in the taxi and private hire vehicle sectors. The Transport Committee's inquiry explores whether current licensing legislation arrangements enable local authorities to effectively regulate taxis and PHVs in terms of safety, accessibility and service quality. It seeks evidence on the impact of cross-border licensing, digital platforms, enforcement challenges and the future implications of autonomous vehicles. The goal is to assess whether reform is needed to ensure consistent standards and effective oversight across the UK.
Well, drawing on experience from across local authorities, legal practitioners and industry representatives, the Institute highlights the urgent need for national standards, improved enforcement powers and legislative reform to address inconsistencies, safeguard passengers and support professional drivers. In summary, the Institute highlights the outdated legislation, cross-border licensing loopholes and inconsistent standards as key barriers to effective regulation. It supports national suitability guidance, improved police data sharing and consistent vehicle and driver requirements across England and Wales.
But there's yet more on the need for taxi reform. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham has called for a key amendment to the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill that would end the practice of out-of-area taxi licensing. His intervention comes amid growing concern from local authorities and transport leaders about the regulatory loophole that allows private hire drivers to operate in areas where they are not licensed.
So, speaking at a recent event hosted by the Local Government Association, Burnham argued that the current system undermines local standards and enforcement efforts. He urged the government to include provisions in the devolution bill that would give local councils greater control over taxi and private hire licensing within their jurisdictions. Under existing legislation, drivers can obtain a licence from one authority and operate in another, often choosing areas with less stringent requirements.
And this has led to frustration among councils that have invested in higher safety and quality standards, only to see them bypassed by out-of-area operators. Burnham described the issue as a long-standing problem and stressed that reform is essential to ensure public safety and to restore confidence in local transport regulation. The English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, which recently passed its second reading in Parliament, is expected to undergo further scrutiny in committee, and we'll report further on that, as you'd expect.
Absolutely, Dennis. And if anyone does want to get more involved with reforms and concerns about taxi licensing, please do get in touch with us because we're keen to explore how we may assist in this area. Now, moving swiftly on, within the sector, the UK Supreme Court and Judicial Committee of the Privy Council has published its annual Judicial Diversity and Inclusion Strategy update. So, Dennis, what have we learnt from this?
Well, Deborah, first, this report sets out progress against 5 previously adopted objectives aimed at improving diversity and inclusion within the sector. We learned from the report that in terms of inclusive culture at court, justices are actively fostering a respectful, inclusive environment, and initiatives include bias awareness, valuing diverse perspectives, and open-door engagement.
Well, in terms of progression of underrepresented groups, the report talks about continued support for junior counsel through advocacy opportunities and outreach to schools and universities via Ask a Justice sessions to demystify the judicial roles.
On the objective of attracting diverse applicants, the report states that events and mentoring schemes aimed at increasing visibility and accessibility of the Supreme Court roles have been held. There's been an emphasis on building understanding of the justice role to encourage applications from underrepresented backgrounds.
And, do you know, Dennis, in respect of learning from lived experience, the report notes that the court has engaged in listening exercises with diverse legal professionals to identify barriers and obtain feedback to shape these future initiatives and internal reflection.
Yes, it's all very interesting. And on partnerships and collaboration, the report states that there is ongoing collaboration with other judicial bodies and diversity-focused organisations, together with support for wider judiciary-led diversity programmes. And on advocacy access, there have been expanded opportunities for junior counsel to participate in hearings, while justices are publicly championing diversity and inclusion, setting the tone from the top.
Now, without a doubt, the intention of the strategy and reviewing objectives is a very positive step, one that LLG would absolutely support because it's vitally needed. Now, it would be useful to see a detailed breakdown of judicial demographics, year-on-year comparisons of progress, as this strategy is in its 4th year now, and no KPIs or benchmarks against which progress has been measured. So there was some statistical information around social media, but probably a full forensic exercise will maybe come at the end of the 5-year plan. So local government is typically a very diverse place to work, and we do have a number of barristers within our midst. So do tell us what you think. So stepping away from the judiciary and onto the field, Dennis.
Yes, indeed, we are literally doing that. Because Tottenham Hotspur Football Club perhaps is one of those London clubs that has a following well beyond London. Some would say it is a controversial club, perhaps not having achieved the success in recent years that other London clubs have enjoyed. But here it's in the news because of its off-pitch activities. Campaigners are mounting another legal challenge to the building of a women's football academy by Tottenham Hotspur on wildlife-rich parkland in North London.
The Guardians of White Webs Group have successfully crowdfunded £26,000 to seek a judicial review of Enfield Council's granting of planning permission for the Spurs Academy, which will include all-weather pitches, floodlights and a turf academy built on 53 hectares of White Webs Park. And Enfield Council's Planning Committee approved the proposals in February, despite local protests, on greenbelt parkland rich in bats, newts and mature trees.
The approval came despite local protests about shutting the public out of a swathe of the park and the council handing a 25-year lease to Tottenham Hotspur for £2 million. The Public Interest Law Centre representing the Guardians has filed an application to take judicial review proceedings, claiming the council breached the Local Government Act 1972.
Now, the grounds for the case are particularly interesting. They include a claim that the council misled its planning committee on the issue of biodiversity net gain, that it failed to properly assess the impact of the development on the greenbelt, and that the decision was tainted by apparent bias. Now, campaigners were unsuccessful last year in a High Court challenge over the granting of the 25-year lease to Spurs, but the new judicial review is based on fresh grounds over the granting of the planning permission.
And there was even more controversy. Less than 2 months after planning permission was granted, a 500-year-old oak tree was felled within a separate part of the park. Mitchell and Butler's Retail, which runs a Toby Carvery pub where the tree was felled, apologised for the upset caused by the felling and claimed it was necessary for safety reasons because the tree was dead or diseased.
Now, an Enfield Council spokesperson said the proposed development of part of the White Webs Park is set to bring significant benefits to the local community, including the protection and enhancement of the park and woods, further investment in a new on-site cafe, toilets and other facilities, as well as preserving open public access to over 80% of the park for all residents.
And going on this, Enfield Council said it is confident that proper legal processes and procedures have been followed in the determination of the planning application and will vigorously defend the judicial review. Well, this has been a big national news item, interestingly, Deborah, and it's been reported regularly over the recent months. And we will, of course, report further on the outcome of the case once the final whistle has blown.
Well, Dennis, I think we're definitely in extra time right now. So let's move on to the final item of this edition. Now, a Public Accounts Committee report has warned that children and families are being let down by unacceptably long delays in the justice system and a lack of urgency from government.
Deborah, the report highlights that in December 2024, there were over 4,000 children involved in cases open for longer than 100 weeks. The statutory time limit of 26 weeks for most public law cases has never been met since its introduction in 2014. And in 2024, these cases lasted 36 weeks on average. And further, there are wide regional variations in timeliness. Children in London wait on average up to 4 times longer than in Wales for their cases to be resolved, in part because of the nature of the complexity of London cases, and in the South East, delays caused by shortages of district judges and social workers have arisen.
And the committee found, amongst a number of issues, that whilst the family justice system is complex, excessive fragmentation is hindering transparency, leading to poor accountability for service improvement and overall performance, and that there are inefficiencies in systems and processes that worsen experiences and outcomes for children and families, making it harder to achieve best value for money.
Well, the report sets out a number of recommendations, Deborah, including that the MOJ and DFE should, over the next 3 months, set out how they plan to improve family justice timeliness overall, including clearer objectives, measurable milestones, and a realistic timetable for achieving them.
And the committee also recommended that the MOJ and DFE should assess the strengths and weaknesses of the current accountability arrangements for family justice and report back by December 2025 on how this might be improved, including how accountability can be strengthened across the system by consolidating current responsibilities or increasing transparent reporting, and how both departments can better support the Family Justice Board nationally and local family justice boards to improve performance. Let's see how the departments respond. And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on this and all of the items discussed today and many, many more besides by going to bulletin number 31, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Goodbye now.
Thank you for listening and do have a good week.